Hello and welcome to B-Movie Enema the series. I am Jeff Arbuckle, B-Movie Proctologist Extraordinaire. With me as always is the lovely Nurse Disembodied. Nurse, how's it going?
Doing pretty swell, Jeff. How about you?
You know what? Pretty good. It's Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States.
Yum yum, Thanksgiving!
Yes indeed. You see folks, Thanksgiving is the time in which we celebrate being thankful for our first world possessions and way of life. In addition to that, we also celebrate the first time in which English settlers came over and, utterly failed at being farmers and hunters and settlers, and then eventually Native Americans came over and helped them out, and they all had one big meal together. Then we went on treating Native Americans awfully for literal centuries thereafter.
But we now get to eat turkey and yams and green bean casserole and stuffing and jiggly jello like cranberry stuff.
I suppose that's true. However, I was trying to be real serious about how we have a history of being jerks to native folk and just get all land grabby and what have you.
But pumpkin pie!
Fair enough. Well, to celebrate Thanksgiving weekend, I thought it would be best if we watched a true turkey of a movie from perhaps the time in our recent history of the United States in which we made sure to tell everyone just how exceptional we were as a culture. The Giant Claw.
The Giant Claw?
The Giant Claw.
How giant are we talking? We talking the size of a patrol ship or something more like an aircraft carrier?
Somewhere in between.
Ah, good to know.
Now, The Giant Claw was produced by Sam Katzman. Now, Sam was the son of a violinist and got into movies with Fox in the 20s. Then, in the 30s, he became a production supervisor for Showman's Pictures, and then joined Screencraft Productions in the mid-30s. Now, before leaving Showman's, he produced a movie called His Private Secretary, which starred a young John Wayne. Talk about American exceptionalism and how we typically treat Native Americans in movies. But anyway, Screencraft Productions was a short-lived studio. However, while there, he produced films for Supreme Pictures. I kind of feel like this was one of those situations that he might have suffered some sort of head trauma and could only remember that he worked for a company which had the initials of SP, but he couldn't really remember which one, so he just worked for all of them. Now, eventually he recovered from that head trauma and ended up starting two more production studios, Victory Pictures and Puritan Pictures. At Victory, Katzman produced a serial called Shadow of Chinatown, starring Bela Lugosi. Now, after having to close down Victory Pictures after a fire damaged the building the offices were located in, he moved over to Monogram Pictures. There, he produced some more thrillers, some musicals, and including more stuff with Bela Lugosi. Now, this began a relationship with Columbia Pictures. Here, he started making action pictures before shifting to movies aimed at a teenage audience. Now, you might think that movies marketed to teenagers would be something like teeny bopper movies and such, but not really. These were a lot more of the monster and sci-fi movies of the 50s, as well as some of the teen exploitation movies during the decade as well. His teenage crime wave was covered on Mystery Science Theater 3000. But his horror films of 1956 and 1957 are probably his best known movies. This was when he made The Werewolf, Zombies of Mora Tau, The Night the World Exploded, and then this movie, The Giant Claw.
I just wish someone would tell me an exact measure of size for the so-called giant claw.
Right?
It's infuriating when I'm only told this is a giant claw, but no one will actually say exactly how big that giant claw is.
Well, maybe they will tell us once we kind of get into the movie.
I can only hope so.
So this movie about an indeterminately large claw was directed by one Fred F. Sears. Now, Sears would also appear in cameos in his movies, but the man directed nearly 50 films and a handful of television programs between 1949 and 1958. Sadly, Sears died just months after the release of The Giant Claw, and it was thought that Sears, having worked constantly with Katzman, would have continued working for him beyond the 50s. That said, Sears made a handful of fairly recognizable movies. He made those Katzman films, Teenage Crime Wave, The Werewolf, and The Night the World Exploded. Aside from The Giant Claw, the other best-known movies that Sears made with Katzman were two of the earliest rock and roll musicals starring Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock and Don't Knock the Rock. But one movie we constantly see clips of is Earth versus the Flying Saucers. That's the movie where you see spinning spaceships flying over famous cities and crashing into the Washington Monument and so forth. Honestly, I would go so far as to say Earth versus the Flying Saucers is one of the biggest inspirations for some of the Roland Emmerich disaster movies over the last 25 to 30 years, where you see really recognizable landmarks being destroyed by aliens. But, alright, we have some giant claw business to get down to. What say you, nurse? Ready to find out how big this giant claw really is?
Yes, I am so excited to be in awe of this monster and his giant claw.
Same here. Now, alright, we're going to get into the first part of this movie, and when we come back, we'll talk more about our stars of this 50s classic.
Wait.
What's the matter?
So,
What?
So if I just put a bunch of X's on a map, I can just make up a pattern for which something is flying?
Yes. I mean, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about...
No. I'm not done with this insane moment we just witnessed.
Well, by all means, keep going.
I actually don't have an issue with the pilot guy saying that the giant claw is flying in a spiral pattern. That doesn't bother me at all. But if you look at the markings he makes on the sightings, they're almost all to the east of the first sighting.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so what if there were sightings not yet reported, or not yet connected to what was seen back east? It doesn't even have to be west, it could be north, or south, or any other place that could totally wreck the guy's nicely spaced out spiraling arms of this pattern.
You're really bothered by this, aren't you?
It's so stupid!
You know, it really is. It's one of those laugh out loud moments that happens that just makes this a wonderful little turd of a movie. But hey, at least we know how big that giant claw is.
Are we sure? I'm not sure if they're content with saying it's as big as a battleship.
Now, if I were to say that they will make sure to say it a bunch more times in this movie, would that help you realize that they are very serious about saying this thing is as big as a battleship?
I don't know.
Alright, so let's talk about our two main stars of this movie. In the role of Mitch McAfee is Jeff Morrow. Now, Morrow was kind of a big deal. The interesting thing was that he was mostly a stage actor earlier on in his career. He got into acting in the late 20s, and he kept on stage through the 30s, but then went into the military with World War II. Now, once he came back from the war, he went back into this, into acting and did some work on stage and did some work on radio. But then in 1950, he got into TV and movies, and his very first film role was as Paulus in the 1953 biblical epic, The Robe. Interestingly, The Robe came out at a time in which biblical epics were extremely big business and often fodder for art direction and costume design Oscar nominations. And at the time that it was released, The Robe got generally decent reviews, but the years since have not been kind to it. Here's a movie that received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and is now reviewed by current film critics as overblown, vapid, and even called claptrap nonsense. It's kind of crazy. But Morrow would go on to do some westerns, noir crime dramas, and adventure films in the years that followed The Robe. However, it would be in 1955 and 1956 that Morrow would get 2 roles at Universal that would basically immortalize him in the minds of people like me. He would take on the role of the friendly alien Exeter in This Island Earth. Then he appeared in The Creature Walks Among Us as Dr. William Barton. Both films co-starred Rex Reason. Now, while The Creature Walks Among Us is the 3rd Gilman movie, it's still a Universal Classic Monsters entry, and This Island Earth sported spectacular effects for 1955. Morrow wouldn't do so badly with those 2 roles. Later on, he starred in the TV series Union Pacific and guest starred on a ton of other popular 60s shows, including a trio of Perry Mason episodes. And in 1971, one of Morrow's last film roles was as Dr. Willard in Octoman. And Octoman is known for two things. One, being dreadfully boring, and two, appearing in 1990's Gremlins 2, The New Batch.
Jeff Morrow is also a whiz at seeing random X's on a map and spotting its exact convoluted and complicated pattern to connect them all.
Apparently, he is that as well. Now, in the role of the lovely Sally Caldwell is Mara Corday. Now, Corday technically had three distinct careers. She first got into showbiz as a dancer in the Earl Carroll Revue on Sunset Boulevard, and she was hired as a showgirl at the age of 15. But after spending years in the show, she ultimately got promoted to being one of the actresses used in the various variety skits the show would do. She then took small roles starting in 1951 until, just like with Morrow, Universal came calling with a lead role in one of their 1955 monster movies, Tarantula. She co-starred with John Agar and Leo G. Carroll. Also appearing in Tarantula was Clint Eastwood in a very tiny part as a jet pilot. And Corday and Eastwood would become very close friends and still are to this day. Now, despite also appearing in The Black Scorpion in this movie, Corday would then become a pinup model. She was a cover girl on several pinup mags and was even the October 1958 Playmate of the Month in Playboy. She later quit acting for several years. She got married and had children with actor Richard Long, and he passed away in 1974. But after that, she appeared in only 4 more movies from 1977 to 1990, all of which were Clint Eastwood movies. And one of those movies was Sudden Impact. That movie is famous for the "go ahead, make my day" line. She was an integral part of that scene as the coffee shop waitress being held hostage by the ne'er-do-well that Dirty Harry really wants to blow away with his giant handgun. Now, there is one thing I really like about Mara Corday in this movie, and I'm not going to lie, she's a very pretty woman. She has this almost no-nonsense look about her. She's got the dark hair and dark eyes, and despite seeing that she could most definitely be a pinup model during this period of her life, she's treated very seriously in this movie. Okay, sure, Jeff Morrow kisses her while she's asleep to initiate their romantic relationship. That's kind of weird. But she's not a shrieking violet in this movie. She's along for the ride of this movie and provides significant movement and intelligence in the plot itself. She's just not just the pretty girl who is meant to be there to get coffee and scream at the monster. She's like this movie's very own Nurse Disembody.
I dare you to ask me to get you a cup of coffee.
Oh, I wouldn't even dream of doing that. All right, so you ready to get back to the movie?
No time like the present.
Well, just wait until we get back, because we are about to see the giant claw in all its glory.
Ooh, then yes. Let's get back to the movie.
Hey, you okay over there, nurse?
Oh my god. That was the giant claw?
Sure was.
Well,
Come on, spit it out.
just what happened? How did they see that and think, yeah, this is totally cool to go with. The kids will love it.
Well, yeah, so Sam Katzman wanted to go with Ray Harryhausen and do stop motion with, an actually good-looking monster. Harryhausen did the effects for Earth versus the Flying Saucers and had a close relationship with Columbia Pictures his entire career.
I'm guessing Harryhausen didn't pick up the phone to meet with him.
Well, I suspect it probably went something more like this. Hello, Mr. Harryhausen. My name is Sam Katzman, and I would like for you to make my monster for the giant claw. How much are your services, good sir? Hello, Mr. Katzman. My name is Ray Harryhausen, and I would like to make your giant claw for you. I'm going to write down how much it will cost on this piece of paper and slide it over to you. And then, Katzman gets the paper and looks at it and says, Oh, that much, huh? Is there a more affordable option? I make very low-budget movies. And then Harryhausen probably just told him to go to Mexico and ask someone down there to make it for them on the cheap.
Yeah, the real cheap.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Katzman probably showed up with a case of Coronas and like $50 because that is the giant claw that got created.
I kind of feel sorry for the poor creature.
Well, how so?
I'm guessing he didn't have many friends in his antimatter galaxy.
Oh, for sure he didn't have many friends. I'm guessing he grew up in a pretty sheltered existence. With a complexion like his, I'm guessing old GC had terrible skin.
That's pretty rough.
Oh, it sure is. And I'm guessing he got picked last for every game of kickball.
I'm reading more about this, and it says that one of the influences was Rodan.
Oh, I'm sure Rodan got razzed by all of his friends at Kaiju School for that comparison too. And for that reason alone, I suspect Rodan was a super jerk to poor old Giant Claw. And I'm guessing Godzilla probably even constantly shoved him into his locker and everything. I mean, even Gamera probably ripped on him from time to time.
Aw, poor guy.
And if I had to guess, Giant Claw probably had a huge crush on Mothra.
Oh, I can see that. They both can fly. Mothra has those pretty wings.
Yeah, but she's kind of like the head cheerleader of Kaiju School, and Godzilla is like the star quarterback and her boyfriend, too.
Ooh, yeah. That probably didn't go over too well whenever GC tried to talk to her.
Yeah, that would definitely get him shoved in a locker.
Kids can be so cruel.
Oh, especially Kid Kaiju.
I'm sure things turned around. I'm guessing he ended up getting rich doing computer programming or something.
Oh, no. Giant Claw mostly hangs out on 4chan now and complains about how woke all of his favorite sci-fi and comic book franchises are now.
Oh, how tragic.
Tragic indeed. Now, I do want to talk about a few things here. First of all, is a battleship an official measure of length? I mean, aren't there different classes of battleships that are, likely have different dimensions?
I don't know. Seems pretty official to me.
If that's the case, couldn't I also say that I would like for you to hand me a plank of wood that is as big as a cat? I mean, what about if I wanted to order a milk amount of hamburgers? Can you just interchange things for measurements?
Sure, why not? Why don't you fetch me a speaker of coffee?
Now see, that doesn't make any sense.
I don't think you know what you're talking about.
I know that no one knew what the monster was going to look like until the movie came out. So I guess the movie just decided that a battleship was pretty big, and that made the most sense. Now, Jeff Morrow talked about going to see this movie in his hometown when it came out. Apparently, whenever the Giant Claw showed up, the audience roared with laughter, and Morrow ended up sneaking out before the movie was over and just decided to go get drunk.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it really kind of is. So one of the scenes that cracks me up in this is this one where they're talking to the scientist guy.
I don't know about you, but that guy makes too many pauses when he talks. I can't trust a guy who can't just give it to us straight.
Yeah, and he's talking about this feather that he got from the Giant Claw, right? And he's talking about having to do all these tests. And when they tried those different machines to test the feather, it destroyed all the machines. Then he just gestures to the table full of completely wasted machinery that just looks like junk. That was kind of funny, that he has this table of junk. Okay. But then near the end of the scene, the camera changes position so the characters can pretty much finish out the scene, and you realize that they were standing in front of the table of junk the whole scene. Like, no one asked the scientist guy that, what the pile of shit over there was just inches away from them was all about. I mean, staging like this feels comedic and just cracks me up in a scene that's meant to be so serious.
What about those candid shots of Giant Claw?
Oh, God. Yes, so it's like he knew the camera was there and he just flashed a smile as he passed by.
I nearly spit my drink out when I saw that. Do you think the people making this movie really thought it would scare anyone?
That's a great question. I suspect it was kind of one of those run-of-the-mill monster movies. Maybe it was meant to thrill people, but honestly, I doubt the intent was to actually scare anyone.
I want someone to make one of those tongue-in-cheek remakes of this movie, but play it up very earnestly. I think it could be a lot of fun. In fact, why don't you make that movie? I'm sure you have about as much money in your wallet as Sam Katzman did when he made this movie.
I will most definitely think about that. But for now, let's get to the thrilling, completely terrifying, utterly scientifically accurate conclusion to the giant claw. And so, the giant claw, both creature and movie, crash lands into the sea. And I gotta tell you, Nurse, I like this movie a lot.
I know you do.
I have to ask the question, and Nurse, please feel free to answer if you can.
Okay, hit me with your best shot.
What makes a truly great bad movie?
What do you mean?
Well, The Giant Claw is a bad movie, yet it's kind of amazing. It's got this perfect matrix of all these things that make it a bad movie, but incredibly watchable and fun. But to you, what makes a great bad movie?
That's a good question. I've seen a lot of bad movies. I mean, you've forced me to watch some really bad movies, but there's something really great about watching a movie that has this really silly monster or some hilarious overacting or bad special effects and just enjoying it for what it is. Not every movie is a Schindler's List.
You know, that's an excellent point. Not every movie is something great, but some can transcend the good-bad scale into something else. And I've got more to say about that, but first, Nurse, care to give your final review of The Giant Claw?
Sure thing. It's very clear that The Giant Claw just wasn't going to be the terrifying giant bird monster movie the producer and director had hoped. I mean, it's so sad that Jeff Morrow left to go get drunk after the audience laughed at his movie, but clearly this movie has a serious budget issue. You can tell the bird was a puppet, you can see the bird's strings, you can see the bird's beak get tripped up on the toy plane's wires when it goes in to eat them. You have an American, a guy from California who's talking in this crazy French accent. He delivers lines like, "If you see the big bird witch, it's a sign you're gonna die real soon." And then you have antimatter scientists putting a bunch of dramatic pauses in their lines that make you wonder if he's any good at science at all. But here's the thing. Imagine this movie being called Turkey Godzilla instead of The Giant Claw. You kind of know what you're getting yourself into. You're going to see a giant, ugly, dumb-looking bird that was totally picked on its entire life and now decided to throw a tantrum on Earth over it. If nothing else, you'd know that this wasn't going to be taken seriously, and people wouldn't hate it so much. Between the movie making me laugh with the bird and the silly, almost mugging at the camera style candid shots of the bird when they were doing their big dramatic slideshow thing, I gotta give this movie a solid 3.5 poops out of 5. At the very least, the youths of 1957 gave me some good lines to try out, like, "Hey, Daddy-O, get that tin can off the road," and "Hey, Daddy-O, don't call us, we'll call you." I'm gonna use those the next time I have some road rage.
Thanks, Nurse. Obviously, between some of the movies I've watched on this show and many of the movies I've written about at B-Movie-Enema.com, I'm definitely in the business of bad movies. Sometimes there's a truly good or great movie. Sometimes there are just bad movies. But then there are the ones that are truly special. To me, The Giant Claw is the most special of all the special ones. I asked the question, what makes a great bad movie? Obviously, this is going to be subjective. Each person will have their own take on this. Some will look at a movie like Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space and see artistry in absolute abstract buffoonery. Some will take great meaning out of overwrought, overwritten melodrama. Some might look at a movie made with almost no budget on an extremely outdated video camera and with just the local non-actors available and consider it a masterpiece, if nothing more than just the effort put in to making a movie. But for me, I like to look at each individual scene, each individual performance, each individual element that makes up the movie, and then judge it against what the attempt was, what came out of it, and how I received the movie. The Giant Claw becomes something really transcendent. I was not all that well familiar with The Giant Claw until about 12 or 13 years ago. One of my idols in what I do is James Rolfe. Some people know him as the angry video game nerd. His appreciation for monster movies makes his Monster Madness series every October something of a tradition for me. I especially love his series he did for Halloween from 2007 through about 2013 or so. Before finally featuring it in his Monster Madness 2010 series that he called Camp Cult, Rolf talked about the giant claw a few times. He often talked about how silly the creature was and how dumb he thought it looked, but he always talked about it in this kind of loving way. I knew what the giant claw looked like. I knew it was from a time in which sci-fi monster movies were a real shoddy hit or miss sort of affair, but always felt like something that should be greatly appreciated. I wrote about this movie in 2016, and it did not disappoint. This movie, to me, is maybe the best bad movie ever made. Sure, some people might hold The Room or Samurai Cop or Birdemic to that kind of regard, or shit, pick any number of Ed Wood's movies, including Plan 9. But this movie just has something else. Sure, each of those other movies that I mentioned are fascinating in some way, but to me, each one of those tipped the scale over to being laughably terrible to the point that you're kind of laughing at those movies more than anything. The Giant Claw, on the other hand, I kind of feel like we're all laughing with it. I mean, look at this movie. Sure, Lou Merrill's French-Canadian character is kind of goofy, but beyond that, Jeff Morrow and Mara Corday are really doing well with what they're given in this movie. I mean, they're talking about this kind of seriously, and they are delivering their lines almost perfectly for this type of sci-fi monster movie. I'd go so far as to say that their chemistry is actually quite good. Now, I don't think The Giant Claw is shot or directed any differently than any other movie of the level of quality Katzman and Sears wanted this movie to have, but there's a lot of generally perfectly acceptable elements that make up this movie. But oh my god, the monster itself, the giant bird, is out of this world. Well, according to the scientist man of this movie, quite literally. It drops the veil a little bit about how movies are made. Not a single actor in this movie laid eyes on the creature until the movie was finished. Not a single reaction to the creature was because they actually knew what the creature was going to look like. It kind of breaks the illusion a little bit, doesn't it? Actors are doing actor things. The Mexican special effects team working on the monster was doing something completely independent of the other side of this production. So here you have this movie that is taking itself totally seriously. It wants to be taken seriously, yet when you realize the monster looks the way it does, and it is this kind of incongruous to how the actors are reacting to what they are told is this scary thing, you can tell that movies aren't made the way that our naive brain thinks they might be made, with everyone on the same page and in the same room at the same time. It's like we know the actors are reacting to a terrible monster, but they didn't know that they were reacting to a terrible puppet of that monster. It's kind of gloriously incompetent, isn't it? Then, if you want to step outside of the movie, you have a movie poster that is selling you a completely different movie. Both of the main posters for the movie talk about a prehistoric monster or a winged monster from 17 million BC. At least one of the posters does tell some truth about how the creature is as big as a battleship and flies 4 times the speed of sound, and that the atomic weapons can't hurt it, and so forth. But this really isn't a prehistoric monster. It's an intergalactic antimatter monster. And let's talk about this as big as a battleship thing. This movie wants to drill that into all of our heads. It's as if the movie itself knows its monster is shit, so it has to have everyone repeat it multiple times that the monster is going to be so big to make it feel scarier. And this is coming out at a time of American exceptionalism being at an all-time high. We had just won World War II and beat back the communists in Korea. So when we hear guys sit around talking about battleships and monsters as big as them, we think, ooh, our battleships are totally the tits, so that has to be a big bad monster. But then that's juxtaposed with this doofy looking creature, and that just looks sad and unfortunate. Like, I want to give that guy a couple of bucks so he can go get a hamburger or a pack of smokes, because he's had it pretty rough. It's just this colossal fuck up of a movie that could have actually worked if they made the monster an actual monster and not something to feel sorry for. But, whew, Nurse.
Wear yourself out there, Jeff?
You know, kind of, but damn it, I love this movie. Probably for all the wrong reasons, but I do love it.
You don't say.
You know, I do say. But speaking of turkeys...
Yum yum, Thanksgiving.
That's right. We hope you enjoy Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. And I do hope you have much to be thankful for this year. But instead of doing all the family crap and the overly crammed down our throats holiday crap that is meant to push some groceries and make people stomp all over each other during Black Friday sales, let's give thanks to those bad movies that give us oh so much more enjoyment and fulfillment in our lives. Let's sit around the old boob tube and watch a bad 50s monster movie together. For Nurse Disabody and I, we need to go to the Boston Market to pick up our rack of giant claws so we can celebrate what we are thankful for, which so happens to be each and every one of you. So from us to you, happy Thanksgiving.
And we will see you at Christmas.